Hello, St. Mary's. So I wanted to have a real conversation with y'all about this Wednesday's congregational meeting. And I wanted to do it right here in the center of where we proclaim our faith. Spoiler alert, Wednesday evening is going to be our congregational meeting. And at that meeting, you're going to hear a lot of stories about what God has done here at St. Mary's this year. But you're also going to hear a lot about our budget and about stewardship and about giving. Spoiler alert, our budget is an increase this year, and it's an increase on a budget that already was increased a little bit the year before. And another spoiler, we're going to ask you to give generously and sacrificially towards that budget. But I wanted to talk about this for a little while, shall we? Can we have a money conversation? In my house, we call these big boy talks. And so can we have one of those talks in this space just for a moment? So there was a time when giving, all that needed to happen with giving was you give to support the church. The church provided something to the community, and folks gave so that they could maintain that structure and the things that the church would offer. And that was great. They say, here's what we do, here's what it costs. And we'd say, hey, help us out. But then things changed in our country and in our communities, and we've all felt that. And it hasn't been recent. This has been happening for the last 30, 40 years at least. That people seemed less interested in church. There were other things to do that took people away from church. In fact, we had this wonderful blow up of wonderful options to support. Churches are not the only people that do good work in the world, right? But we kept asking in the same way. We kept saying, here's what we do, here's what it costs, help us out. But that pool started to dry up. And it wasn't too long before churches start to feel that pressure. And then they say, wait a second, here's what we do, here's what it costs, and we really need to help you out. And that has gotten to the point now. And if you look around, you see lots of churches that are going, oh my goodness, this is a crisis. We really need you to help us out. And churches now often find themselves in the position, and I mean this with no disrespect, we find ourselves in the position of begging. And it's true that people will at times give to meet that immediate need. They'll feel that and say, wow, gosh, I really have to do something about that. But this kind of asking, we're in a crisis, help us out, is no long-term solution to the church or to its life. My good news for you all today is that it doesn't have to be this way, and it never had to be this way, because giving is not about an economic transaction to support an organization. And this is captured best in the words of Henry Nouwen. I love Henry Nouwen. If you're into spirituality, you want to dive a little deeper, you're just looking for like a mentor that you can walk with and read. Nouwen is wonderful. And he was a Catholic priest who for a long time taught in some of the most prestigious universities in the country until he left there to go live in a community that was populated by disabled individuals. And so if anybody could have avoided the fundraising conversation, it would have been a guy who was teaching at prestigious universities. But he saw fit to ask this question about what does it mean to fundraise? What does it mean to give? And he wrote these words. He said, fundraising is precisely the opposite of begging. When we seek to raise funds, we are not saying, please could you help us out because lately it's been hard. Rather, we are declaring we have a vision that is amazing and exciting. We are inviting you to invest yourself through the resources that God has given you, your energy, your prayers, and your money in this work to which God has called us. Our invitation is clear and confident because we trust that our vision and mission are like trees planted by streams of water, which yield their fruit in its season and their leaves do not wither. This comes to us from Psalm chapter 1, verse 3. Nouwen relocates the entire conversation. It is not an economic transaction. It is not a business transaction. It is not a tax write-off. It is an act of faith. Why? Because it requires us to listen to God, to discern what God is doing, and to respond in faithful ways. All of this is wholly and completely God-centered. So what does it mean? How do we do an act of faith? If giving is an act of faith, how should we think about it? How should we go about it? Well, acts of faith, friends, never start with us. They always start with God. God created in the beginning. God sent his son. God called Abraham. And always God takes the initiative, and it's our responsibility to figure out what God is doing and join that. And so the thing we do first is to figure out what God is up to. And friends, we're going to tell you that tomorrow on Wednesday. God has been up to so much. 4 baptisms, 6 confirmands. Right now, we're worshiping over 125 people on a Sunday, if you count up all the ways that people engage with our stuff. And that doesn't even get into all the other stuff, the money we've given away. God is absolutely at work here. So we have to discern that. God is at work here. And then our job is to join that. But here's the problem. When we discern what God is doing in the world and seek to join it, that vision will always be bigger than our ability to meet it. Let me say it again. When we seek what God is doing, that vision will always be bigger than our ability to meet it. Because if it's not bigger than our ability, then it doesn't require faith. If God isn't calling us to something bigger than what we can do on our own, then we don't need God. You understand? And so the vision is always going to be bigger, and we're always going to be saying, oh my gosh, how are we going to do that? That's where faith starts. Because that's it, the second part is to pray. When we discern what God is doing, we will always find a gap between what God is asking and what we're able to do. There's always this gap. And that, therefore, requires God to move, and it requires us to grow. God has to move, and we have to grow, and together we close that gap. And friends, there is story after story after story of individuals and organizations that have asked for God to move in powerful ways, and God has done exactly that. But we've got to pray. We've got to say, God, you have to provide the way for this to happen. You are going to have to work miracles. And friends, I'm here to tell you financially, if there's any congregation in our area who can talk about financial miracles, it is this one. So we say, God, you are going to have to provide a way, and God, you are going to have to grow my spirit. You are going to have to make me something else so that I can meet what you are doing in the world. And only after we have been serious about those prayers, and when I say serious about those prayers, what I mean is serious about those prayers, then we figure out what our part is. And here's the thing. When God is calling us to God's work, that it will always stretch us. It has to, because God is building faith in you. Fundraising is not about the church. Fundraising and giving is about faith in you. Now, what we've got ahead of us is an ambitious plan for doing the work that we believe God has called us to in this community. And friends, I am here to tell you, I've served 4 churches, and been a part of a lot more. And I can tell you that St. Mary's has been extraordinarily gifted with people and with stories and with resources to carry out a vision that is bigger than we could have seen. And the vision's only going to get bigger. It has to. The church is growing. The vision has to grow alongside of it. And friends, there's always more good to be done in the world. Have we really done all the good that God intends for us to do? And so what we're going to need you all to take a step of faith, not just to support the church, but to take a step of faith and join us in that work with your time and with your bodies and with your prayer and, yes, with your money. But Nouwen says this. He brings it back to the point. He said, indeed, if we raise funds for the creation of a community of love, by extension, not an organization, not a bunch of programs, not a bunch of staff. If we raise funds for the creation of a community of love, we are helping God build the kingdom. We are doing exactly what we are supposed to do as Christians. And so, friends, I'm going to leave you with that. And I'm going to invite you over the next day or so to be discerning about what your part might be in that. Is it a comfortable conversation? No. Is it an enjoyable conversation? No. I much prefer standing up behind the pulpit right here and preaching the message. But friends, the message is always, how is God building faith in you? And friends, I think this is the message for us now. God has some wonderful things for us to do. We're asking you to be a part of that in every way that you can. And so we're going to ask you to be in discernment about that, and we'll see you on Wednesday. We look forward to sharing the stories of God's goodness here. We look forward to sharing the journeys of our consistory nominees as they take a step of faith and join consistory, and we look forward to looking ahead to what God has called us to do. We've captured that in the budget, but even more so, it's hidden away in our hearts, and we look forward to sharing that. So friends, we'll see you all on Wednesday. Until we're together again, peace and good, y'all.